Hey, we're back, and this time we've got the flying creatures of the island. Flying is a very powerful ability, and I wouldn't be surprised to see that flying creatures are all relatively weak at dealing DPS compared to the other creatures that you find in Ark, especially when compared to creatures around their saddle's engram level. Either way, it's going to be an interesting thing to dig into, so let's get cracking. So, starting at the start, or at least as early as the start can be for flyers, level 38 with the Pteranodon saddle. And of course, this couldn't be Ark without adding some sort of weird intricacy to way the creatures in the game attack. And for flying creatures, the intricacy is that some of them have differing attack speeds while landed versus when they're flying. And for the Pteranodon, staying in the air is actually worse for doing damage than being landed. So, while in the air, the Pteranodon has a DPS of 40, which for a level 38 saddle isn't too special. But while grounded, the Pteranodon's DPS increases by 7, which makes the Pteranodon better, but still nothing great. Not to mention that the Pteranodon doesn't really have the stamina to fight for long periods of time on the ground or the air either, especially if you're intending to use that stamina to then escape and flee. Which makes the Pteranodon one of the most extreme cases of scout dinosaurs in the game, as they're very fast and they can get you from A to B without a problem. But if you do get caught up in a fight, it's going to be a really sticky situation. However, the Pteranodon does have one last trick up its sleeve. While it's in the air, it has the ability to corkscrew, which is a really useful tool for aerial combat, as not only does it do damage, but it also makes you invulnerable for the period of the roll, which is great because aerial fights, for the most part, aren't about running into your enemy and trying to out DPS them, and they're instead about swooping in, doing an infrequent but huge hit. So uniquely, flying creatures may care more about individual bite damage more than they care about DPS, because doing 100 little hits every second is great, but if there's only enough time to land one of those hits while you swoop by your enemy, doing one big hit every second is going to result in better damage output during the fight. Now, for 99% of the time, you'll never actually be fighting anything in the air outside of PvP, but on some of the DLC maps, big scary wyverns can show up, and there are also corrupted creatures, and for those situations, the corkscrew move is incredibly valuable. So what's next? Next up is an honorable mention, the Terror Bird. It's not a flyer, but it can glide. So it's loosely similar to the rest of the flyers, and I think that it's worth mentioning in this video because its saddle level is only 33, which means it's accessible earlier than the true flyers, and it has a DPS of 50, which is stronger than the Pteranodon. So if you can stomach getting up the mountains to glide around the world with, rather than using genuine flight, then the Terror Bird isn't an awful choice, especially in the interim. Moving on to our next actual flyer, the Pelagornis, a bird that really deserves a model TLC, because I have absolutely no idea how this thing is supposed to fly with those cardboard wings. The Pelagornis is an interesting creature for its unique ability to land on water, which is something that all other flyers are incapable of doing, and it also means that you can use fishing rods from the Pelagornis' back, and on top of that, it's also great at harvesting and storing organic polymer. Its saddle is unlocked at level 43, so it's not that much more difficult to acquire than the Pteranodon, but is its DPS significantly better? No, it's even worse. The Pelagornis has a DPS of 36 while flying, and while landed, it's the same. For both situations, it's not great. Just comparing the single hits, the Pelagornis is also worse than the Pteranodon, so it's not even better for aerial combat either. However, it does still have its niche of being good at gathering polymer. But that is about it, and if I'm honest, a refrigerator will hold your organic polymer just fine, and storing it as soap is normally the best long-term option anyway. The Pelagornis is honestly a pretty big contender for being given a TLC update, but there's a bigger one, so I'll save that topic for later. After the Pelagornis, the next flyer we have is the Tapejara, and its unique ability is to fly in all directions while it's in the air, which makes it very good for maneuvering, and on top of that, it's also got the ability to land on walls, allowing it to hang off at funny angles, which is cool, I guess. Its saddle level is 55, so it's not quite as close together as the Pelagornis and the Pteranodon, but it's still pretty close in the grand scheme of things. Can we expect the DPS to jump up in a similar small but positive way? We can, right? Well, the Tapejara's DPS is 38, and that's not brilliant. And it's not brilliant on the land or in the air, but the Tapejara does have some backups. Firstly, its individual bite damage is equal to the Pteranodon, meaning that while a Tapejara loses in terms of DPS, it comes out equal when you're swooping past each other, only able to do one attack each. And that's on top of the fact that the Tapejara has better mobility options, allowing you on your Tapejara to hit more often than the Pteranodon. Secondly, its saddle has extra seats, allowing you to bring a passenger that could use a gun. And while it feels a little bit cheeky to bring it up, a passenger with a gun not only opens up your ability to have a ranged option while flying, but it also greatly boosts your ability to do DPS. But where the Tapejara truly shines is in the very, very late game, once you unlock its tech saddle. With the tech saddle, you have a very capable long-ranged laser gun, which combined with the Tapejara's aerial mobility and the simple fact that you can stay airborne while shooting, makes it an incredibly strong method of aerial domination, on top of the laser gun having great DPS. Next up is the Argentavis. And I can't even call it recent anymore, as it happened way back in 2018, but when the Argentavis got its TLC update, the RG's ability to do everything skyrocketed. And ever since then, it's been a very popular creature within the game. It's reasonably fast, or rather, it's fast enough, and then you've got its great weight capacity, combined with the fact that it's got reduced weight for most of the valuable and heavy things like obsidian, metal, black pearls, stone, and more. Its saddle can also act like a smithy. It can carry mid-sized creatures like an Anki, making it great for metal runs. And to top it all off, whenever it eats a corpse, it gets a buff to its health recovery, so it's got a lot of perks to use. And if you've watched enough of these, you probably know that the extra side buffs normally come at the cost of DPS. So, what's the DPS of the RG? It clocks in at a DPS of 53 while landed, which isn't actually that much better than the Pteranodon, and for a saddle that is unlocked at level 62, 53 DPS isn't brilliant, but it's still better than any other flyer so far. And eating its dead victims to activate its health recovery buff greatly benefits the RG's staying power within a fight. However, unlike the Pteranodon, the RG is better at dealing DPS while in the air, with an improved DPS of 61, which is better, but still below average for its saddle level in the grand scheme of things. But if we just look at flying creatures, then it's dealing very good DPS as a whole. And yes, the eagle-eyed among you will have noticed that this is the strongest flying creature on the island, and that leads us on to the next creature on our list, the Quetzal. So right now, the Quetzal is in a really sore spot. I feel like the Argentavis has stolen most of the Quetzal's niches. So at the moment, the Quetzal only really has the platform that you can build upon niche. But even then, that's also been nerfed to high water, as you can't place turrets on the platform saddles anymore. But okay, we're talking about DPS. So how much DPS can the Quetzal dish out? Well, it's not great, and it's not great even by flyer standards. it's so not great that even the Pteranodon is able to deal better DPS than the Quetzal. The Quetzal comes in with a DPS of 38, making it equally as bad as the Tapejara, but without all of the extra tech saddle shenanigans that the Tapejara has access to. I guess the Quetzal has enough room for another person to stand on and shoot from the back of, so it's not too dissimilar in that regards, as you're still able to bring a passenger and have them shoot things for you. But you're trading a huge amount of speed and maneuverability for doing that on a Quetzal rather than a Tapejara, which is a real shame because the Quetzal is such an iconic dinosaur and one of the biggest flying predators in all of history. The only saving grace and the single glimmer of hope for the Quetzal is that it's got the highest individual bite attack among the flyers on this list, which in theory makes it good for aerial combat. However, if we're going to be honest here, it doesn't help that much, as the Quetzal is so slow that you're not going to be able to employ the swoop in, attack once, and get out of there tactic that would make this statistic valuable to look at. I really wish that the Quetzal could get a TLC update, similar to what the RG had back in 2018. I don't really know how or what I'd do to improve the Quetzal, but making it better at carrying resources around would be a good start, either by allowing it to have its speed leveled, probably not, or by augmenting its weight capacity by giving it weight reduction similar to the RG, maybe make it stronger so that it's a powerful threat again. I don't know, maybe make it have some sort of speed boosting gimmick, a bit like the Carcharodontosaurus, where killing things gives it a stack that you can hold on to, and then you can right click or press C to increase the speed for a couple minutes. Maybe you don't do anything like that for the Quetzal, and instead you just give it a fancy tech Quetzal saddle that lets it shoot laser beams, or have jet engines to make it faster, or let it drop bombs onto creatures and houses below it or something. Ark is a difficult game to balance, and all of those options probably have some form of major side effect that would mess up the balance for the rest of the game. But at the very least, the Quetzal really needs just something. Give the poor birds something. Here's a quick honorable mention, the Archaeopteryx. It's not a creature that you can ride, so you're obviously not going to be able to do damage on it while riding, but by grabbing its little chicken legs, you're able to jump off cliffs and glide down to safety. So it's worth having a minor mention in this list. Although, I do have to beg the question, why aren't you using parachutes? So with all the creatures out of the way, let's just have a quick look over how they all compare to each other. Thankfully, or I guess not thankfully, there aren't many flying creatures in the base game, so most of them don't overlap in terms of roles. The Pteranodon and the Tapejara are probably the closest, but even then they're different forms of scout dinosaurs, one based on speed and the other based on maneuverability. In a similar vein, the Pelagornis and the RG are both utility creatures that are designed to carry or gather useful materials, but again, because they're gathering different things, they have very different roles. And then I guess the Quetzal is the Quetzal, I guess. On the whole, all of the creatures that are able to fly are pretty weak compared to their non-flying counterparts, which I guess is expected, but their DPS being so closely clumped together was really interesting and quite surprising, as I was expecting them to have a range more in line with their saddle levels. However, it's sort of understandable given how strong of an ability flight is. One more thing that I think is worth mentioning is that the percentage increase of damage from level up isn't always equal across creatures. So the difference between the Tapejara and the Quetzal in terms of DPS is not exactly equal, despite both of them having 38 DPS at base, as the Tapejara's DPS will increase by a 20th every level up, whereas the Quetzal's DPS will increase by a 25th. And unfortunately, that makes the Quetzal's situation even more dire. If there's anything to take from this video, it's please give the Quetzal a buff. And that's it for this one. If all things go to plan, this video will be coming out on the 7th of February, which means that it's also time to dig into some Monster Hunter stuff for a bit. although we've also got Wild Hearts coming out very soon, so we've got a lot on our plate. Either way, I'm looking forward to all of it, and if that stuff sounds appealing to you, then maybe hit the subscribe button so that you can see those videos as soon as they upload. And while we're here, why not give this video a thumbs up? But most importantly, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.